Morning, folks. Eric Carlson here again. I am running for the Republican nomination in the 1st Congressional District here in Illinois. This is video 9 in my series about problems and solutions. Again, these are in no particular order. I'm just doing them as I can get them out so that people can see where I stand, my view on things, and what I would do if I were elected to Congress. So this one is going to be video 9, voting rights. This is a big thing in the news right now. You saw Joe Biden go down to Georgia earlier in the week, and he basically called anyone who would vote against anything that he said a racist, and he referred to Bull Connor and Jefferson Davis and Wallace, and the problem is that all three of those people were Democrats. He forgot to mention that part, but anyway. So I'm going to tell you what this is. First of all, it's about taking your eye off the ball. Things are so bad in this country after 1 year under Joe Biden and the Democrats with their policies that are destroying this nation that they don't want you to focus on that. So what do? They go back to their old playbook of division, to divide us along lines of race. So the way they do it is, if you listen to their words carefully, listen to the words that come out of people's mouth carefully, the way they word things. It is always women and people of color. Well, women make up slightly more than half the population. And then people of color, who does that leave? It leaves people who look like me, white males. So they want to divide you and give you an enemy that they've told you your entire life is doing nothing but keeping you down. I can assure you that's not true. People like me are worried about everyone. They want everyone to do better, because even for a selfish reason, if I said I wanted everyone to do better because that makes my life better and easier and I don't have to deal with fighting and stuff, what difference would the reason be? I mean, it's about divisiveness with them every single time. That's what they do. They can't just say, hey, Americans, here's why we think these things should be changed. They have to divide you and get you in different camps and keep you fighting amongst yourself, because that's the only way they stay in power. If there's someone that they can tell you is out to get you, then you'll vote for them. If someone comes in and gives you the actual facts and what should be done, that's no good. They don't want that. They literally think that you are children. They pander to you, and they think they have to take care of you because you're incapable of taking care of yourself. Where on the conservative side, the right side, the Republican side, what we're saying is, you're all Americans. Everyone is equal under the law. You have the ability to do things, and you have the right to do things. It is up to you whether you decide to do those things, such as vote. So I'm going to go over some things right now. Voter suppression is a big thing that they talk about. It doesn't exist, people. It is an absolute lie, and I'll tell you why. Ask yourself this: the people that they're targeting to tell you that your vote is being suppressed, ask yourself this: did you want to vote in the last election? And were you allowed to vote in the last election? Did you vote in the election before that and the election before that? If you're a regular voter, which probably only 60% of the people are at max. I mean, it's very hard to get people out. But you had record turnout, a record number of votes, and supposedly Joe Biden got more votes than any presidential candidate in history. Supposedly he was that popular. Joe Biden has done so many great things in his 50 years in Washington, D.C., that people just overwhelmingly came out to support old Joe. But why? The poll came out the other day. Joel's approval ratings are at 33%. So to borrow one of Dan Bongino's, if you listen to him on the radio, one of Dan Bongino's things is he likes to quote the movie Moneyball, where Brad Pitt is the baseball manager, and he asks why, or the general manager, and he asks his scouts, if you're telling me the guy can hit good, why doesn't he hit good? Well, in this case, if you're telling me Joe Biden is the most popular presidential candidate in history, why isn't he popular? Not even going to go into the 2020 election. That's in the past. We've been, like I said, it's in the past. We have to move forward. So you had record turnout. So that's a lie that people were suppressed, because everybody who wanted to vote got to vote. Precincts. everyone has a precinct. Everyone has a precinct that they go to vote. If you take mail-in voting out of it, precincts are drawn up by population, and they're pretty much the same size. There's some differences because of geographic necessity, but most precincts make up the same amount of people. Your precinct is in the general area where you live. It's not that far away from you. So this thing that people can't get to the polls is ridiculous. You could walk there, you could drive there, you could bike there. In the city of Chicago, there are groups that will take people to the polls. They will send buses around to pick up people and take them to the polls to make sure that they get there to vote. So anyone can make it to the poll. That is a flat out lie, saying that you're being denied a place. So let's go into some of the things that Joe Biden brought up about polling places and what happens there, and how people were being oppressed. Water. No one was ever denied water. You know, this lie that, oh yes, the Republicans were trying to keep people from getting water and have them stand out in the hot, hot sun or in the elements. I'll tell you something here. Electioneering law says that a person, if I am backing a Republican candidate and I'm handing out literature, I have buttons on the poll day, and I'm standing there and you're waiting in line, I cannot, because I'm electioneering, I cannot walk up and give you water, because that is considered me giving you a favor, possibly trying to influence your vote. That's exactly what it is. Not that it's going to influence your vote or anything else. The law is there for a reason. So I can't come up and say, hey man, I saw you took a cab here, let me give you $20 to get your cab fare home. That'd be great. Hey, I just helped them, travel back and forth to the poll. It's not influencing anything. That's why those laws are in place, folks. There's water at these things. I've seen the photographs in the film. Stacks of cases of water. If you want to grab a water, go ahead. And that brings us to the next thing, lines. Why are there so many lines? Let me ask you this. Like I said, all precincts have roughly the same amount of population. In my precinct, and we have a very high turnout in my precinct. A lot of people vote here. A lot of older people who take this seriously. And I have never had to wait for a voting machine when I go in there. The most I've had to do is stand behind one person to wait to sign my name and show my ID. So ask yourself, these lines, where are they coming from? It happens when voting machines go down, which happens. It happens when the people running that particular precinct aren't on the ball, that they don't have things lined up where they can sign people in. And so those places, and if you look at it, it's mostly in Democrat precincts. If you look, they talked about Atlanta, how long the lines were down in Georgia and everything. Those are all Democrat precincts. You have a majority of Democrat people running that polling station. So if you want to blame anybody, blame the Democrats. Teach them, give them a class on how to properly run a precinct during an election. It's not that hard, people. This is not, they use these excuses to try and scare you and divide you and tell you something wrong, so you take your eye off the ball, so you don't notice the price of gas going up and the price of food going up, and what's happening with the Chinese, and worry about Hunter Biden's laptop, any of that stuff. They got to keep you divided, angry at somebody over here, and tell them that you're being oppressed and suppressed and everything else. New York City decided recently to allow illegals to vote in their city elections. Well, if you're registering someone to vote in your city election, what are the odds that they might slip in to a national election or a state election? Now, the reason this affects us here in the 1st District is because if these people are allowed to illegally vote in national elections, that influences your vote. That influences your vote because when say these illegals, say you had 2 candidates running and it was 50-50. Then you had a bunch of illegals that were brought in by Democrats, like you're seeing now at the border. 400 more last night came across in one group, illegals into the United States, including 2 Chinese. So it's not just people from Central America and Mexico coming up. It's people from all over the world. They're flying there and coming up, but we'll talk about that in another video. California, places like California and other places, illegals can get state IDs. So you can come in. It's very easy to game the system if you have ID and you have part of the things. You know, somebody might take pity on you, and if they're a Democrat, they might say, "Oh yeah, you know, we'll get you voted, we'll get you a ballot." Because once the ballot's in the machine, your name's no longer on it, so it just gets counted and goes away. All this stuff affects you as an American, and it takes away. This is what takes away your rights. They want to talk about voting rights. This is taking away your right as an American, a legal American citizen, to have your voice heard in an election. Voter ID. Who out there, again, ask yourself this little introspection. Who doesn't have an ID? Who out there does not have an ID? It's very easy to get one from the state. If you're legally in this country, you can get a state ID here in Illinois in the 1st District. No problem. And what is it to come in, show your ID? You have to show it for everything else. If you want to cash a check at the currency exchange or at the bank, got to show ID. You need ID for just about everything we do these days. In fact, they're asking for ID now, checking for vaccines, checking your papers, but they won't ask to vote. This is something that you should take seriously. You should want everyone to do that. And the majority of black voters do. The polls show the majority of black voters, like 70, I think it was 77% in the last poll of black voters said, yeah, voter ID. So how is this an issue? But yet they keep trying to ram it down your throat that, oh, it's an issue and this is something you should care about. Yeah, you should care about it. You should care that everybody that is legally allowed to vote should be able to vote, but do it legally and not allow this to influence our elections. So let's go over here to the solution side of the board because we like solutions. The elections by law are to take place the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November. That's clear. That's in writing. That should not change. It doesn't need to change. It's always worked in the past. Holiday. I'm fully in favor of making the first Tuesday in November after the first Monday a holiday for voting. This would, we've done it our entire lives. If you're over 18, we've done this our entire lives. We've had to go to work, find a time in the morning or time in the afternoon or go at lunch or whatever, but we got it done. We managed to get it done. So if you made it a holiday, that would mean everybody, and this would give everybody the entire day to get to the polling place. And I have no problem even keeping the polling places open till later, till 10 o'clock. But it has to be a one day thing. And to say with our technology today that you can't get it done in one day is absolutely ridiculous. 1 day voting, that's it. 1 day. None of this early voting and all that stuff. If you want to avoid conflict, if you want to put everybody on an even keel, this way there's no argument, rather than saying, oh, well, this suppresses these people and this keeps these people from voting and some people won't because of this. If everybody knows the day it's on and the time it's on and it's a holiday, everyone has the day off. You know where you have to be on that day. That's what you're going to do. Make that a priority. If it's that important to you, you should be able to make that a priority on that day. No mail-in voting. The mail-in voting should be reserved for people over 60 and people with a disability. Now, a lot of people don't realize this. We haven't had mail voting for all that long, mail-in voting. Absentee voting started back in the Civil War. And that was because the soldiers who were away from the front, they wanted them to be able to vote in elections. From then until the year 2000, the only people who were allowed to vote were absentee, were people that were out of the country for some reason, and military members. And people, if you made it now, people with a disability and people over 60. Other than that, everybody, be an American and go to the polls. It's your right, but it's also your duty as a citizen. And you should take that seriously, and you should take pride in the fact that, yes, I went out and voted today. I did my civic duty. That it's so hard that people don't understand that, we have to make it easier for people to vote. It's very easy to vote. You just go there. If you can't make that little bit of sacrifice of taking a half an hour to go to your precinct, get a ballot, fill it out, and do your civic duty, If that is too much for you to handle, you need to think about, are you worthy of the freedoms that we have here in this country? If you're not willing to take that little bit of time out of one day that's being given to you to do nothing but this, and take your part, and then go home or gather around with family in the evening and watch the results come in and see and know, and not have to sit there and wait. Okay, well, these votes came in, but now they have to open the mail-in voting, and then we have to wait for these ones that come in, and it could change anything. There's too much opportunity in there for votes to be, no matter what side you take. No matter what side you take. Joe Biden the other day when he spoke in his press conference said, well, if we don't get this, then, if we don't get the voting rights bill that we want passed, we have to question the 2022 elections. They're trying to put doubt in your head. The Democrats are going to get hammered in 2022. The Republicans are taking back the House and the Senate. That's a foregone conclusion. The Democrats have screwed things up so badly in well, it was less than a year. We're at 1 year now, but they did it right off the bat. They screwed everything up with their policies. So you are going to see a backlash in this country that's going to come and sweep them out of office. So in the first district, if you vote Democrat this time, I'll save that for another video. Uniform voting machines. Now, this is something, the states hold their own elections. The states are in charge of having their elections. So they set the time of their own elections, and they take care of all that. But the thing we've had a problem with is you have so many different voting machines and things, and this was a big issue in the last election. You had issues with voting machines and questions and software and all this other stuff, and it caused a lot of confusion. And there were issues like up in Michigan where they found where votes had been changed. Those machines can be calibrated, and anytime a machine can be calibrated, it leaves it open to questions. So I would suggest uniform voting machines at the federal level. The federal government would be in charge of providing however many voting machines need to go to each state. And those states would be held, a federal election commission would hold those in a warehouse for the elections here in Illinois. Those would be distributed. But the entire country would have the same machines is what I'm saying. So if there was any issues that wouldn't, this machine does this and this machine does this, everybody would know. Everybody's on the same sheet of paper. And I would simplify it. So I know I'm dating myself here, but some of you guys remember the old Scantron machines when we were in school. You would take a quiz or a test in the middle of the day. Teacher would give it to you real quick, and you would take your number 2 pencil and you would fill in. And we still have those. We still do that. And then a machine reads it and calculates the votes. The Scantron machine, if you did that, then you still have the paper copy. You have a paper ballot. There needs to be paper ballots as a record so you can go back and actually count if there's an issue. A lot of these states are using machines that just do an electronic thing and print out the total, which is an issue. You can't go back and check things. So it has to be simple. And this is the simplest thing. If I come in and I fill out that ballot and it goes through the machine, just like a simple Scantron machine, and it should not be hooked to the internet. None of these machines should be hooked to the internet. All the Scantron machines at every precinct would scan, and then that precinct, at the end of the day, the precinct, the judges would sit down and say, this is what we have, these are our totals, and they would transmit those totals to the central authority who calculates those for the state, and then at the national level, so on and so on, up the ladder. Again, paper ballots only. You have to have a record there. Voter ID, we talked about that over there. Everybody should be presenting for voter ID. That's a no-brainer, and everybody agrees on it. Everybody across every spectrum in this country agrees, the vast majority, that this is the way to go. Signature, you should also have to sign. A lot of these states are saying, and this is why they like the mail-in ballots, because they don't have to come with a signature, so there's no signature verification. That opens everything up. Even if you thought, see, the Democrats want this because they think that's going to be their way traditionally. We can come up with a box of ballots out of the blue in the middle of the night if we needed to, here in Chicago and in Cook County, we know how that works. But if you have, the person has to go in person on that day, stand in front of you, show you an ID, and sign their name. For the longest time in this country, people went in person, and they did for the longest time in the beginnings of this country. People went and they voted by hand. You stood there in front of your neighbors and everything, and they asked you who you wanted to vote for, and you did a voice vote. You raised your hand and said, I vote for this person. So everybody knew who you voted for, so it wasn't that big of a secret. And nobody wind up killing each other because they voted for somebody else. That's your right, and everyone should respect that. One thing I wanted to go over, it just slipped my mind, is with the 1 day voting. Now it slipped my mind again. Sorry about that. But yeah, so these are my solutions. They're common sense solutions, and the thing is that thing that just came back to my mind. These flatten the playing field. Everybody talks about a flat playing field, equal for everyone. This is it. Everyone has the opportunity to show up on this day. I don't know. None of my friends who happen to be black, they all have ID. None of them don't have IDs. So when they pander to you, when the Democrats pander to you and try and divide you and say somebody's trying to oppress you or suppress you, and you know, they want to check your ID. Well, of course they want to check your ID. They check everybody's ID. They check my, well, so they don't really ask for an ID, but I always show my ID when I go in there. You know, this is Illinois. It depends on who your judge is. And if someone doesn't ask you for my ID, I ask them, I'm like, you should be asking for ID. And I show them my ID so they can check it against the voter roll. So that's it for this video. Again, I'm Eric Carlson. I'm running for Congress in the 1st Congressional District here in Illinois. If you have any questions, comments, I'll be putting more of these videos out as we go. I do them as fast as possible with all the other things I've got to do. Again, this is a low budget. I'm a one-man campaign right now. I've had friends want to volunteer and everything, but I don't want to take away anybody's time in this. I want to show people that you can make a difference by yourself. No matter what your background is, no matter where you come from, you can do this on your own. And there shouldn't be big money in politics. You shouldn't have to spend there. Like I said, the national average is $2 million to run a campaign to win in the country. Now, a lot of times that's less, but in Illinois, I saw some in the last election where congressional seats, people were spending upwards of $10 million in a congressional race. I think there was over $60 million spent in congressional races the last time here in Illinois. And a lot of those districts were uncontested because they were flat out Democrat. There was no one running against them. And you still had over $60 million. Think what this state could do with $60 million in donor money. American people are the most generous people in the world. That's a fact. That's a statistical fact. The American people give more to charities here and across the globe than any government outside of the U.S. Any government in the world. The American people open their hearts and open their pocketbooks to anybody else. And we give money to political campaigns because we want to see the people behind the same ideas that we have. But you have to ask, are they really doing it to help you, or are they doing it to get themselves in there to keep power? And you have to look at Democrat policies across the board. Again, I don't have any problem running with anybody in this race because nobody in the race in the 1st District right now has ever been to Washington. So Democrat and Republican here, none of us have ever been to Washington. None of us are to blame for the problem that's up there right now. So you have to decide who you want to send there. So that's it. I'll close this video again. Again, I'm Eric Carlson running for Congress in the 1st Congressional District in Illinois, and I hope you support me. Thank you.